that we're all feeling patriotic, let's get into bookends.
Can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
So, you sound so enthusiastic there.
Of course, John, please.
Hazy Shade of Winter at the beginning. Who is the famous cover of that I grew up thinking sang this song originally when I was 8 years old?
Bananarama.
Good guess.
That was a good guess. Do you know, Josh? Or
I
know.
I'm pretty sure Matt knows. Yeah,
I do. It's the Bangles.
Oh.
The Bangles. Yes,
I always
a very
get those
good cover.
groups mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
So all girl bands are the same, Josh. That's basically what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
So this is go ahead.
I was going to make a joke. I was going to say, for all Josh knows, they're letting women play rock and roll for the first time right now. So.
Who let these women play guitar? So this is the duo's fourth studio album. It was recorded over a fairly lengthy period of time, starting in September of 1966. And all the way through February 1968, but most of the work actually started, in late 1967. So most of the album was recorded in a relatively short period of time. It was released on April 3rd, 1968, which was 24 hours before what famous event?
What was the date again?
April 3rd, 1968.
Was it
Martin Luther King Jr.?
You got it. See, you guys are better with history than I am with geography.
Yep.
So Paul Simon, leading up to this album, he experienced a period of writer's block that he was. So it kind of took him a little while to get the songs down, and Columbia execs were pushing for a little bit more output because they were used to getting records at 2 to 3 albums a year. So this was a little troublesome for Columbia. But I think with the result of how this album did, that they ended up being okay with it. Because this album did reach number 1 on the Billboard charts and stayed there for 7 straight weeks, and it remained on the Billboard charts for a total of 66 consecutive weeks. And it had such heavy pre-orders that Columbia was able to apply for award certification before any copies left the warehouse of the factory. So this was they knew this was going to be a big hit.
Can I ask something that I just thought of real time? Did that time on the charts bookend the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s, Matt? Or did it end in the 60s?
60s, April 68, no.
Oh, well, I thought I was going to do a cool...
it wasn't in the 70s. It was close, though, John. It was close. And Clive Davis at Columbia, famous music mogul Clive Davis, anticipated that the album was going to be successful, and he made the suggestion of raising the price of the album $1 above the industry average to a whopping $5.79, which...
That's a lot of money.
Let's see how good your math is. Do you know how much money that equates to today?
Ooh.
$25.
$35.
$43 in 2019. So that's just but one of the ways he was able to justify it was because they included a really nifty looking poster in the vinyl copy. So you not only got the album, you got a poster of Simon and Garfunkel silhouetted against like the backdrop of the Brooklyn Bridge or something like that. So I think Simon and Garfunkel they had a little bit of an argument with that. And it's unclear exactly if Davis was able to keep that going for a while. But so this is a concept album, which
I was wondering that. That was a note I wrote down.
I was too. It's funny you say that because I was thinking that too.
So, but it's a concept album in a weird way because only the first side entails the concept. Because side 2 is essentially is essentially a bunch of stuff that were kind of throwaway tunes that didn't really make the Graduate soundtrack, which came out before this.
That so answers the question I had in the segment, Matt. And it sounds like Josh did too, but yep, okay.
Cool. Yeah. Now the analogy works because it's not a true bookend of the 60s.
The first side is the bookend, right? So I guess that some of those songs on the second side were, Simon had pitched to Mike Nichols, the director of The Graduate, who didn't really, what was that? I forget the names of it.
Is the concept like from birth to death? Is that what it is? It sounded lyrically like that's okay. Even the names, right? Like Save
Voices
the Life of My Child
people.
And Voice of Old People and Old Friends. And Simon and Garfunkel aren't exactly opaque in terms of their songwriting. So,
do you think if they did the remake of this album or the remastered version, that sounds from old people would just be Simon and Garfunkel talking?
Yeah, probably. Yes.
They should do that.
Yeah. So And prior to recording, Simon told Garfunkel, quote, "I'm going to start writing a whole side of an album, a cycle of songs. I want the early ones to be about youth and the last song to be about old age, and I want the feel of each song to fit." So yes, this is basically the looking through the lifespan of a human life. The lyrics concerned youth, alienation, life, love, disillusionment, relationships, old age, and mortality. Not that I would know any of that, because I just read that I wasn't listening to lyrics at all. So
But only for the first 7 songs, right? So that whole artistic statement would be like a crisp 15 minutes, pretty much, right? Yeah, because the whole album's 29 minutes, and there's 5 more songs.
Yeah, and one of the songs is a 2-minute old people talking about mucus and money and stuff. So, so. The Simon attributed that some of these themes that he was writing about were to the feelings that he experienced while smoking grass, which he often did while writing. He felt that he needed to smoke grass to write his best songs. And let's see. So this album actually was very successful. It kind of, coupled with the success of The Graduate and the soundtrack, it really launched these guys into the stratosphere. Simon began getting many offers to score different films, licensing music to movies. And Paul Simon called it their first serious piece of work. Another funny thing about this was that the group was under an older contract with Columbia Records, and this contract stipulated that Columbia would pay for all studio costs. And Simon and Garfunkel took advantage of this because they got a bunch of musicians, including people from orchestras. So there's cellos and violas and different types of instruments from orchestras. They also took that song "Punky's Dilemma," which might have been one of the songs that was rejected from the Graduate. That took over 50 hours to record. They were being extremely meticulous to the point where they would even record single notes to fit into the music. So it was, Simon was going nuts with the production.
Give me a break.
The Brian Wilson style production there.
Yes, exactly. And this, remember, the album that came out prior to this was John's favorite album title, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme, and that was the first album that Simon really took the helm, with production, and so he took this to the next level. But this also began to see the decline of the duo's collaboration and showed early signs of Simon's intention to go solo. But that's basically the history of the kind of little synopsis of the record. So let's go into the feedback here. So let's start with you, Josh. What do you think?
So once I figured out that whole concept album and you guys already know how I feel about concept albums, I was on board with this album. I did not like the first concept portion of the album. I thought that was the weaker part of the album. I thought all the songs on the back end were really good. That being said, there's still some good songs on the first part, but I think overall this album is uneven. It seems like just ditch the concept part of the album and just play the good songs. Like, more than half the songs on here are awesome. So the concept album just seems half-baked when it's only half the album, and I don't know why they did it. And the songs like Hazy Shade of Winter are excellent, and you don't need a concept to hold up a good song, in my opinion. I really like this album. This album also sounds really good on headphones. I found out. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but you could hear a lot of those instruments in the background that Matt was alluding to. I heard some clarinet and sax, and you can hear people talking in the background at some point, or just like different sounds. And you have, like on America, you get the bass in one ear, and then you hear other stuff in the other ear. That it's really cool. So I'm a big fan of that. I appreciated the album more after listening to it on headphones. Yeah, I think overall it's great. Fakin' It was my favorite song that I had not heard before. I really like the harmonies on that. And the drop, they do this like drop in the chorus. They drop their voices or drop the tempo or something. That's cool. And I mean, the highs on this album are really high. So for that alone, it's worth listening to, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's. I actually have very much a similar take to Josh. I think if you just were to strip out the 3 pieces that were
just I guess Josh was calling it concept piece, but one is a 2 minutes and 7 seconds of older folks talking about the world, and then there's 2 short little reprises that open and end the first section of the album that are musical pieces but also involve other stuff. If you were to take those out and you were to look at it as 9 songs, this is the strongest Simon and Garfunkel album we've covered by quite a bit. And I think we know by now, I was a pretty big fan of Sounds of Silence, and it surprised me how much I liked it. But this album's better. And I think it's, as Josh said, it's the back end of it, like Faking It and Mrs. Robinson, A Hazy Shade of Winter. Even At the Zoo being somewhat goofy, it was goofy in a good way, not in a bad way.
It was a catchy like tune.
Yep. And I did like some of the songs earlier in the album once I listened to them a second or third time. Also, this album, I mentioned it before, we joked about the Brian Wilson production, but it very much was like a Beach Boys album or a Bob Dylan album in that there was a lot of instrumentation in the background, and the second or third time you listen to it, you're picking out the different instruments that are in there. Josh mentioned some, but it makes sense when Matt said a lot of musicians were brought in, because in each song you can see more sophistication in terms of both the production and the amount of instrumentation layering the background than you did in the earlier albums. And so, and with the stereo, moving away from the mono, it definitely, you can hear it even more pronounced, especially the bass lines. It starts to sound like a Dylan album in the sense that the bass lines pop out at you, even though they're singing, folk rock pretty much, which was a staple of how I always hear Bob Dylan. So I would definitely say this is a recommendation for you. And one thing about Simon and Garfunkel, man, if you don't love the album, they're out the door in like 30 minutes tops. So, yes. And that's the thing. It's like, it's hard to be offended by something that only lasts 30 minutes, So
yeah. I think I have a similar reaction to you guys. First of all, I will say that this has my favorite Simon and Garfunkel song on it, which is America. I love that song. It's the chorus. I like how it's subtle. It's obviously it's Simon and Garfunkel. They don't really, Hazy Shade of Winter is as rocking as they probably ever get, right? Which is still, right. Which is a great song. I agree with you guys. That's a great song too. But I just like how, it's like they're holding back with America, and I think that it just the production with it, the vocals. I'm not much of a lyrics guy, but I do like the lyrics of that. I like the imagery that he's coming up with, and so that is my favorite song. So I think that to me is by far the best song on the album, and it makes the first side stronger. I agree. I probably like the second side a little bit better. The first side doesn't bother me as much. Because you're right, like it's almost like Voices of Old People you just skip over. I listened to that a couple of times, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of overall message or theme or something like that. And there's not.
I know.
It's Simon and Garfunkel went to a retirement home in Reseda and just taped a bunch of people like talking in a day in February. That's all that is, right? So it's like, and it's oddly, it's kind of. I guess it's maybe not terribly oddly placed because it's between overs and old friends, but it's a weird thing. It's just a waste of time as far I don't know, but I think I do like the bookends themes. I think that's very pretty, and oddly enough, I read this and I can't believe it came up this week because I didn't think about it, but it's also interesting that it came up this week that somebody in Wikipedia it said that the guitar playing for the bookends theme was an acoustic piece once compared to the work of the Moody Blues, which
I can see that a little bit. Sure. It
was just an acoustic piece. I'm not like, acoustic is.
I'm always a little sketch on Wikipedia. Like it's good to get some basics, but I've learned get your very basics from Wikipedia and then don't get many opinions from them.
And normally that's the stuff I pass by, but I'm like, oh, we're covering the Moody Blues this week, and I thought that was just kind of interesting.
But I reserve the right to say that could be true as I listen to more Moody Blues, but I do not see it based off our comparison points this week.
Yeah, and there was also comparison. There was comparisons with Sgt. Pepper. You know, it's like to the point where the critic was saying, "Oh, you know, like this song here is, you know, At the Zoo is like being for the benefit of Mr. Kite." You know, and it's like I'm like, all right,
no,
so, yeah,
too many drugs.
Yes. Yeah. So I did like it. I think the more I agree with you, John. The more I listened to, I appreciated the first side a little bit more. The more I listened to it, Overs is kind of like a jazzier kind of tune.
That grew on me the most of any track on the album.
There's some good lines on that album too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So, and Save the Life of My Child. Anybody care to guess what that instrument is at the very beginning?
I was wondering.
That's the Moog synthesizer, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yes,
it
is.
Hell is the Moog synthesizer.
Nice.
And it's used with the assistance of Robert Moog. So I think he might have actually helped them play.
Had a note to bring that up too, Matt, and I'm so angry you stole that.
I'm sorry.
Throwing it at the very end, but yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
So there you go. We're getting full circle again here.
I actually can understand what the Moog synthesizer sounds like now, so I feel so proud of myself that I can place it now when I hear it. So
well, it certainly took me by. I can't say that I knew that it was the Moog synthesizer when it first came on, but it certainly took me aback, right? Because you got the Bookends theme, the very quiet guitar part, and then all of a sudden it's like, bow.
Yeah, it is jarring.
It has a distinct sound, though. It really
sure
does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But no, overall, I liked it. Again, I really struggled to decipher which of these albums I like better.
You mean of the Simon and Garfunkel?
Yes, of the Simon and Garfunkel that we've covered so far. There's not one that's really standing out at me more than the others. I think that they all have their really strong parts and their parts that I could do without. So I'm not really hearing that here, but but I did like this, and I think that it does. Once I kind of had an understanding of what was going on in the first half, I didn't mind it as much. I think Old Friends is fine. It's kind of it's not one of my favorites, but there's not really anything on here I disliked other than Voices of Old People. That's not even really a song. So I would give it a recommend, and you're absolutely right, John. You don't have to spend much time with this because it's crazy amount of time at like how meticulous they were about this and how quick the album is over. So yeah, I guess Paul Simon had a vision.
This was after Pet Sounds and all the layering. Is that where that influence is from?
Yeah.
Like everybody.
Pet Sounds was
like
was that 66?
3 years. Yeah, 66.
Oh, yeah.
This is 3 years after. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So everyone was like, "We need to do that."
Well, remember Phil Spector was who was basically moving things from mono eventually into stereo. I mean, there's a whole collection of Phil Spector stuff mono and then reimagined, stereo. So, and he's working closely with the Beach Boys and other acts too. So it all kind of becomes incestuous in the 60s in some ways. That's why we keep hearing about the same people over and over again.
Right.
Yeah. And we haven't even mentioned, I mean, Mrs. Robinson, I mean, I would probably say, would you say?
Yeah, how did we get this far without mentioning that? Yeah.
It's their most well-known song, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Would you say? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't associate that song without the
yeah.
movie and Simon and Garfunkel. I would think people who don't even listen to Simon and Garfunkel know they wrote that song. So.
Yeah. And the Lemonheads.
Oh, yes. Yes, your famous Lemonheads.
Which is, I remember reading an article about how much Evan Dando just hated that version that they did for it, and basically the studio made them do it. So,
oh, really?
But something like he came to Jesus eventually because they started getting royalty checks, like after the Lemonheads were no longer a thing, and then he gained an appreciation for the fact that those royalty checks were coming.
Well, fun fact, I saw Evan Dando and two other dudes who were the Lemonheads at the time play in a Hard Rock Hotel lobby in Orlando, and they played the entire It's a Shame About Ray album, and they did not play Mrs. Robinson, which is the closing track of that record. So I thought that was interesting. So
did you boo them as a result?
I didn't. Did they
have the guitar case open, or was it closed while they were singing for the?
They were outside the Hard.
Yeah, outside the Hard Rock.
No, it was in the lobby. It was just past you walk in the hotel. It's past the bar, and there's this little roped off area, and I'm like, this is interesting to do.
I
shows there.
I actually like the Lemonheads, so I don't want to make fun of them too much. But spoiler alert, they will not be in the 90s in terms of top 100 albums or the Rolling Stone bonus ones. So
yeah, but and then so Mrs. Robinson, I almost feel like that song. I still really like it, but I don't think I like it as much as I should because it's just so over. Like it's almost like I take it for granted as a song. You know what I mean? Like I've heard it so much, it's so ubiquitous.
I get that.
And I think that takes away from it a little bit.
It also doesn't really line up super well with the Graduate too. Like as the lyrics, when you listen to it, it kind of seems like it should, but it doesn't lyrical content wise, which I always have found very funny because it's sort of like a nostalgic ballad about America to some degree and every woman, you know what I mean? And then it's not about this like seductress besides the name being shared, right? So that's always been an interesting conflict to me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also the first rock and roll song to win Record of the Year at the Grammys.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
So I guess everything before that must have just been like show tunes and musicals and things like that. So
they were popular.
Or jazz.
Jazz too. Yep.
Or like Frank Sinatra crooning.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Elvis.
But
yeah, maybe you could look up some of the past winners.
Elvis was rock and roll, wasn't he?
Yeah, Elvis was rock, so I shouldn't say that. But yeah, like Frank Sinatra wouldn't be considered, and I'm sure he won one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if anybody else, but the one other thing I would say is that I kind of mentioned this earlier about how this was kind of the beginning of the end, and really the beginning of the end was probably when they were 15 and Paul Simon signed his own contract for an album.
Well, isn't the next
Garfunkel never got over that. He's still mad at Simon from something he did when he was 15, and I guess Simon. Hang on. I guess Simon said something to him like, "Are you still mad at that?" He goes, and Garfunkel's response was, "You're still the same person." So, yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. And isn't their last album called Bridge Over Troubled Water too, which is hilariously perfect as an allegory? Yeah.
I think we'll probably go into their into the dynamics there a little bit more with that record because we are going to cover that in a couple weeks. But this one, they wrote. See, this is another thing I'm not sure I totally agree with what I read, but there was some indication that they were abandoning the harmonies, and so this album was more focused on it was more of an individual, like either Simon or Garfunkel taking the lead, and then the harmony would take more of a back seat as compared to their previous records or their previous songs.
Let's save that comparison for once we've heard all four, because I feel like that's a good place for it, and I feel like we have a lot to still cover with the Moody Blues and the band. So that sounds like something we can all listen for in the fourth album.